Hi YouTube, it's Cathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for February 15th through 21st. This week I read 2 books, I watched 1 show, I watched 3 movies, and I listened to 2 books. First this week I read Tooth and Claw. This is a book completely set in a dragon society, and this society has complexities. The biggest parallel that I can see to human society is kind of the Victoria age, so there are different people of different classes, there are different servants that work under certain classes. Your station or class within this society really matters, especially for marriage prospects. And in this book we're primarily following the members of one specific family. The patriarch of this family is very old, basically on his deathbed, which, by the way, since they're dragons, they do sleep on a hoard of gold. And he has made his wishes very clear to one of his children, who also happens to be basically a pastor. But the complicated thing with dragon society and how inheritance works with that is, yes, of course, in your will you can say who you want your gold to go to in your estate and all of those things. But the thing is, the actual body of the dragon also goes to the descendants as food. And usually that's kind of a tuck-in free-for-all. However, this specific dragon wanted the majority of his body to go to his youngest children because they need it the most. But the son-in-law, married to the oldest daughter, thinks that this is stupid, just tucks in, eats a bunch of the dragon meat before anybody has a chance to, and now one of the sons wants to sue him. In addition, this family has 2 unmarried daughters, so their share of the inheritance is basically going towards dowries, but now they don't have a place to live, so one of them is splitting off and going with the sister who has the terrible husband, and one of them is splitting off and going with their priest brother. They've never really been apart before, so this is really painful for them, and they've both decided that they're basically going to combine their hoards so that one of them can have a really good dowry and the other one plans to not marry and will just end up living with that sister and whoever she marries. But they've decided that they both have to approve of whoever decides to get married's intended. This world building is incredibly fascinating because not only is all of that up in the air, but there's other characters outside of these specific characters that definitely have a say towards this narrative. And through these characters we see different things like dragon fashion and history and religion. It is just such a fascinating book and I highly recommend it. The second book I read with my eyeballs this week is Redshirts by Scalzi. This is my first by him and I don't think it'll be my last, so if you have any recommendations for his other books, let me know down below. This book is basically about a new class of ensigns on this very specific starship, and everything is a little bit weird on this ship. For example, occasionally when people are on away missions, they suddenly know things that they shouldn't know and they don't know how they know that information. Or when a solution is needed within a very set time parameter, sometimes they use things to do that don't actually make any sense. It comes to the point where they find out that they are just part of something called the narrative, and the narrative doesn't really care for the lives of so-called Redshirts and will kill them off willy-nilly to heighten dramatic tension on an away mission. So obviously, not wanting to die for no particular reason, these people want to figure out this problem and figure out how to change it. I love books that are self-referential to the genre that they're in, and I really enjoyed this one because it's broken up into a few different sections. The majority of the book is this first section, where they're trying to figure out what's going on. They're talking about bad science fiction writing. They have to use bad science fiction writing to get out of certain things. They do certain things within the genre that are really fun. But then at the end we have 3 codas. One in first person, one in second person, and one in third person. And each of these codas take this little unsolved question from the main narrative and kind of go through it more thoroughly, and I really enjoyed that. It was also fun to find out in the note at the end of this that this author also used to write for a sci-fi TV show, so I imagine that's where he got the idea for this show, but he is very adamant that his show was run in a much better way than the show that is depicted in this book. As for the show I watched this week, I watched the entire 7th series of Shetland because I've been waiting for all of the episodes to be up on BritBox, and then I kind of forgot that it was happening, and then I was like, wait, all of the episodes should be up, let's do that, and I watched them all yesterday. This is a show I first started watching about a year ago, and I watched every single episode that was up at the time, so I either watched all 8 series or all 9 series. I have a feeling there were 8 series when I watched it all the way through, and then I watched the 9th series a few months later when it was uploaded, and now I've watched the 10th. This, of course, is a one-word British crime show that takes place in Shetland, you might have guessed, which is a series of islands in the north of Scotland. And each series, or season, if we're North American, tends to have about 6 episodes, and there's usually one overarching mystery that happens throughout all of those episodes, and these police officers are trying to figure out what happened. In this one, an elderly lady is found on her property, deceased, not by her own hand, and it is quite a mystery to figure out what happened in this very small village on one of the islands. The history of this small village is steeped in tragedy because 20 years previously there was this huge storm and 2 of the families from this not very large village, I'm thinking it only has maybe 5 families, actually died during that storm, and that's kind of shaped everything up until this moment. Wonderful series, very much enjoyed it. It was very fun to see these characters again because I've not seen them for quite a while. It did use one particular trope that I don't like only because I've seen it so many times, but I can't tell you what trope that was because it is a major spoiler. As for the movies I watched this week, the first one was Can You Ever Forgive Me, which is based on the book of the same title, which is a true story about this woman named Lee Israel. She was a biography writer living in New York City. She was kind of down on her luck. She was trying to get work, but it wasn't going very well. Her agent just wouldn't give her anything because the 3 volumes that she did produce didn't do very well. At some point, she was so down on her luck that she decided to sell some memorabilia she had. A personal letter that somebody famous wrote, I can't remember who it was at this point, and she realized that she could make a lot of money selling those. However, she didn't exactly have access to a lot of those. But what she did know was how to write in certain people's voices because she had been a biographer, so she started forging memorabilia to sell. She was so good at this that a few of the letters that she wrote in these people's voices ended up in other people's biographies and actually had to be taken out in the 2nd edition. But seeing as we know about this now, you can probably imagine that she didn't get away with this forever. The lead in this movie is Melissa McCarthy, and she does a stunning job. Although, just as a funny side note, my roommate has recently been rewatching Gilmore Girls, so of course I know her from Gilmore Girls. I knew her as Suki. That was the first role I ever saw her in. And occasionally there were a couple of just like small noises that she made in this movie that I was like, oh, that is a noise that I know from Suki. But that's only because I'd probably heard her make that noise pretty recently. The second movie I watched this week is Bride Hard. This is exactly what it sounds like. Bridesmaids and a wedding and a whole situation mixed with a Die Hard situation. So we have this main character played by Rebel Wilson, and she had this best friend as a child, but they were basically ripped apart because one of them had to move away. But now it's 30 years later and that best friend is getting married and she is meant to be the maid of honor even though they haven't seen each other all that much. They are best friends. So by this point she's actually missed a lot of the things like the dress fitting and all these little things leading up to the wedding, but this is the Bachelorette, which she has actually moved to Paris because she also has a mission she needs to do in Paris. But as the Bachelorette is going on, she finds out that the mission has been moved up to that day, which is not great because honestly her team didn't really need her for this mission. I watched this mission and I went, she didn't need to be there. Any other person could have done that bit that she was doing. But obviously her disappearing in the middle of the Bachelorette doesn't look good, and she's kind of on shaky grounds when she gets to the actual wedding, which takes place on a private island in Georgia, and of course shenanigans ensue, and she is the only person who can run around Die Hard style and try to mess with the bad guys. It was fun and silly and full of action moments and full of silly little things, and I really enjoyed it. The one thing it didn't give me in terms of Die Hard, because the architecture just wouldn't allow it, was crawling around in air vents, but weirdly enough, the next movie I watched the same night had somebody crawling around in air vents, and that's 28 Weeks Later. This, of course, is the sequel to 28 Days Later, and they have recently come out with 28 Years Later. This is a zombie apocalypse movie that takes place in London, and this is 28 weeks after the outbreak has happened, and we are actually seeing these characters coming back into Britain. One of the characters that actually survived all of this is played by Robert Carlyle, and it's funny because he just seems to be following me around because a couple of weeks ago I actually watched his show from the 90s, at least the first 3 episodes of it, so it just felt really funny to see him again and be like, oh, it's Robert Carlyle again, wonderful. And trust me, this movie has a couple of other people that you will recognize in it, but I won't tell you much more about the plot because it's pretty easy to spoil how things are gonna go with this situation. As for the books I listened to this week, the first one is Minor Feelings. I believe the subtitle of this one was An Asian American Reckoning, and this is memoirs about about this person who is Asian American and what that looked like growing up, and how she thinks that's affected myriad things in her life, but then also looking at a few different people throughout history who were also Asian American and how that likely impacted their existence. This book kind of went through her childhood and her growing up and then her into her college years, and she had these friends whose names she has changed for anonymity, and she's got some very interesting stories to do with the art scene of that time. But then she really delves into the backstory of this one poet who happened to have been murdered, but nobody really talks about that. And overall, I'm just a really big fan of memoirs from perspectives of people who aren't exactly like me. That's how I learn. Although the one weird thing is that we do almost share a first name. So sometimes there would be like dialogue in the story and people would be like, Cathy, why are you wearing a shirt? Take your shirt off. And I was like, no? What? Oh, they're not talking to me. But of course, if you're me and you're just walking down the street and suddenly your audiobook is telling you to do things, you're like, wait, what now? The other audiobook I listened to this week is Come to the Window. This takes place in Nova Scotia in 1918, and our main character in this one is a journalist who has been sent to this very small town to cover the trial of this woman who killed her husband on their wedding night. In addition to that spectacle, a whale has recently washed up on the beach of this very small town, which is a problem that has to be solved. And believe it or not, these two events are definitely connected. To me, it felt like the author nailed the journalistic tone of the main character so well that when I was finished this, I had to look up to see if this was based on a true story, because it very much felt like these people could have been real people just over 100 years ago and what they were going through and just exactly what was going on in the time frame in Nova Scotia. It is of course very fun for me to read books set in places that I've been before, so occasionally I'd be talking about the Bay of Fundy, or they went past Yarmouth, or these characters lived in Truro or Halifax, and it was just very fun to be like, yeah, I pretty much know where those are on the map. I've been to some of those places. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!